Hello and welcome. Today I'm going to be talking about a few different things. I'm going to be talking about the new Lawless Conceal the Deal foundation, and I'm going to be talking about my thoughts on that and how I like to apply it. I'll also show myself applying it in my preferred method. I'm also going to be talking about and showing you the new Chantecaille Skin Tinted Moisturizer shade. They've brought it out in the shade Aura, so I'm going to be talking about that. I'll show you that, and I'll also compare it to the previously lightest shade in the range, which is Alabaster. And then I'm also going to be talking about the new Westman Atelier Eye Pods in the shade Rendezvous. So if you'd like to see all of that, just keep on watching. First, let's talk about the Lawless foundation. So this is the Conceal the Deal foundation. It's a very watery, oil-free foundation. You need to shake up the bottle before you use it. And it's a full coverage matte foundation, but very, very thin formula. You saw how little I had on my hand, and it really spreads out, and you can see how high the coverage level is. I got it in the shade Cristallo. I was a little bit concerned trying to pick my shade. I wasn't sure quite what to go for, but I ended up going with Cristallo, which is described as fair with neutral peach undertones, I think. And I was a little bit nervous because sometimes peach tones can go a little bit orangey, but I don't find this one orangey at all, and I think it's actually the perfect shade for me, so I'm really happy with that shade match. What I found with this foundation is that I don't like to apply it just on its own as like an all-over foundation. For me, it's a little bit too matte, a little bit too foundation-y, makeup-y looking when I do it like that, and it just doesn't quite sink right into my skin. It just sits on top of it a little bit in a way that I don't really like. I also find that when it's applied in that way, it really clings to any dry patches on my skin. If I have blemishes that are kind of in the first part of their healing stage, you know, when there's a little bit of a dry skin attached to it, it really clings to that and really emphasizes that type of texture on my skin. So I find it's really best for me to wear when my skin texture is quite smooth and even, because I do find that it does that clinging thing even when I wear it in my preferred way. My preferred way to wear this, and how I'm wearing it today, is mixed with the Auric Glow Lust. So what I do is I take one pump of this and then just a few drops of this. It's very packed with pigment. Mix that together, and then I usually apply it with my Real Technique sponge, just because that kind of further thins out the pigment and the formula a little bit and just makes it sink into the skin a little bit better. So that's my favorite way to wear it, and that's how I'm showing myself applying it today. It has a really good neutral shade, and it's nice and light. I don't find that it oxidizes or darkens at all on the skin, and this foundation wears really well. It's a matte full coverage foundation, and it wears like you would expect that type of a foundation to wear. And even when it's mixed with the Auric Glow Lust, I find it wears really beautifully all throughout the day. But as I said, if you have texture issues or patches of dry skin, I don't think I'd recommend it, because I know, at least for me, it doesn't work when my skin is in that type of a state. Right, next, let's talk about the new shade of the Chantecaille Tinted Moisturizer. I was really happy to see that they had brought this out in the shade Aura. Aura is the lightest shade in their other foundations that they have, and they previously didn't have it in this tinted moisturizer formula, and Alabaster had been the lightest shade previously. So I have both of them here that I'm just going to show you to compare. That one's Alabaster and that one's Aura, and let's blend them out so you can really see what those colors look like. So you can see how almost orangey and quite warm Alabaster is, and definitely deeper, and Aura is a much more appropriate shade for someone with my skin tone. I think it still looks a little bit darker than my skin tone, but when it's really blended into the face and kind of has a chance to settle into the skin, it looks very one with the skin and doesn't look too dark. It looks fine with matching my face to my neck. So if you were interested in this product, or you've bought it previously but only been able to get the Alabaster shade, and again, if you're around my skin tone, I think you'd be really happy with the Aura shade. I'm happy with it, and I think this was a good addition to this line. The formula of this tinted moisturizer is really nice. I think that I've heard people say, and maybe even the brand itself say, that this is their highest coverage of their foundations. They have this one, they have the Future Skin in the little pot, and then they have the Future Skin cushion. I don't particularly find this to be a different level of coverage than the gel foundation in the little pot. I think they're kind of on par. It's just that the textures are a little bit different. The gel foundation feels more like jelly and watery. This one feels more like a traditional moisturizer, but I don't find that I get much more coverage out of this one than I get out of the Future Skin in the pot. And I think it wears like most tinted moisturizers. They're not really known for being long wearing. They're not really meant to be long wearing. So I would say after probably about 4 hours, if I'm just wearing the tinted moisturizer, I would need to touch up with more of it or concealer or powder or something, because it will wear off and kind of sink into the skin as time goes on. But I do think it can wear really nicely with a concealer. So one way that I like to wear this is just all over my face, and then I'll take my Rose Ink concealer, which is a really beautiful long wearing concealer that still looks very natural on the skin, and I think that it pairs really nicely with this product because it allows you to maintain that little bit of a dewy, fresh finish, but it adds the coverage and the longevity that you don't get with just the tinted moisturizer on its own. And I'm just really happy to have a tinted moisturizer in a shade that's light enough, because before this I had yet to come across a tinted moisturizer that was actually light enough for my skin. Even the fairest shades in all of the ones that I had tried were just too deep for me and too orangey, so I'm really happy that they've brought this one out. All right, last and unfortunately least, I'm going to talk about the Westman Atelier Eye Pods in the shade Rendezvous. These are the newest ones that they've brought out. I do have the eye pods in the Le Jour trio, and I actually like that. I find it's pretty easy to apply, and the colors are nice, and I don't find any issues with that product or formula. These ones, unfortunately, I do. So I'm just going to show you the colors first. So we have this kind of deep, cool toned brown, and then there's a peachy shade, a little bit of iridescence to it, and then we have the khaki shade. So let me just talk about the khaki shade first. For me, this is the real letdown of the set. It's all kind of a letdown for me, but this was the worst offender in my mind because I couldn't apply this without it being patchy. No matter what brushes I tried, you know, what material, synthetic, natural, dyed, undyed, you know, fluffy brushes or flat shader brushes, even with my finger, this applied patchy on my eyes, and I couldn't find a way to not make it that way. Then the peach shade, although it's a really beautiful shade and I was very excited about this one, it's very, very sheer, and it just requires so much building to really get any impact from it at all for me that, again, I just don't find this worth it. I didn't really have too much of an issue with the brown. I did find it a little bit patchy, but it wasn't a big problem like the green one was. I tried them several times and I really tried to make them work for me. And I was able to find a way to get a look that was nice and looked pretty good. I found the best way for me to apply them was to put the peach all over, kind of as like a priming shade, and then I would build the green into the outer corner and crease, and then a little bit of the brown again, just to further deepen out the outer V and crease of the eyelid. But the green always went on patchy for me, and I was able to eventually blend it out so that it didn't look too patchy, but the amount of time it took for me to blend that out was like way more than I would spend on any of my other eyeshadows, whether those be creams or powders. So I can't justify keeping these, especially for the price, when I know that they're going to sit around and I'm not going to use them. I also found that even with that eye look that I found worked best for me that I described for you, it didn't wear well. It wore down through the day. Even after a couple of hours, it started really fading, and by the end of the day, it was really, really faded. So unfortunately, these didn't work for me, but I do love pretty much everything else in the Westman Atelier range. I think they make excellent quality products, and everything else pretty much has worked really nicely for me, although I really don't like returning cosmetics because I know that it just gets thrown out most of the time. I just can't keep these around, knowing how much they cost and how much I don't like them and that they don't work for me, and knowing that I will never reach for them again. So unfortunately, a big miss for me on these. I didn't film myself applying it at all. There are tons of other reviews out there that if you're interested in seeing some different looks and how they look on other people's eyes, you can definitely check those out. But unfortunately, I just don't have any interest in trying these again after trying to make them work so many times, and I know it's not gonna work for me. So I think that is it for this video. Let me know if you have any questions or comments below. I always love to see those. If you'd like to see more from me and you haven't subscribed to my channel already, I'd really love for you to do so. Thanks so much for watching. Take care, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.